We had some pretty noteworthy wireless gaming headset releases last year, and thinking about how I wanted to package this video today, going into 2025, I think I'm going to take a king of the hill approach to product review. So we're going to revisit a couple headsets that I think currently hold the crown for different reasons. We'll talk about the long-term ownership experience and any updated impressions, and we'll look at some more recent competition from Asus ROG, Alienware, Razer, and by surprisingly popular demand, the Astro A50, to see if any of these new releases unseat my current picks. We'll talk about FPS gaming performance and single-player gaming, because I've seen a lot of comments that single player is a market that feels underserved in YouTube reviews. In general, if an audio product is good for FPS, it's also going to be good for single player, but there's one major difference between sound profiles aimed at competitive stuff versus a more immersive gaming experience, and that's bass. Assuming the product has a good level of detail, as long as you can add that bass back in without making the overall presentation sound poor, it's going to do great for single player as well. But not every gaming headset can pull that off. I have to point out too that these wireless flagship systems are expensive, and wireless is primarily geared for convenience and features, not necessarily audio quality, and definitely not mic quality. If wireless isn't a big deal to you, you can get a FiO K11 DAC amp and a $50-ish pair of IEMs. You'll be in for a little over $200. It'll sound great and it'll serve you well for years. With modern wireless tech, latency isn't really a concern these days, but wired is still winning for pure sound quality. For those of you that enjoy wireless freedom, like to always have a mic at the ready, game on multiple systems, and enjoy having some audio mixing features built in, let's get into it. So coming into this video at the top of 2025, my two main picks for like the past year have been the Audeze Maxwell and the Arctis Nova Pro Wireless from SteelSeries. The Maxwell for pure sound quality and the Arctis Nova Pro Wireless because even now this still leads the league in feature set. And thanks to a recent pad upgrade from Joe over at Gadgetry Tech, this is primarily what I've been using for gaming over the past few months. My personal copy is actually a first gen that I've had in rotation since my original review of this unit way back in July of 2022. So I've had this exact set for almost 2.5 years now, and nothing feels loose or worn out or anything. Still really light at 355 grams and very comfortable for a variety of head sizes, even my very large head. I've done some embarrassingly long camel grind sessions in these. On the newer versions of these, the active noise canceling nubs inside the ear cups are a lot smaller now, and the ear pads themselves are thicker and a lot more plush than the first versions. I'm not a big fan of the SteelSeries GG software. I find it can be pretty buggy and it does crash on me sometimes, but the Sonar software is amazing for EQing. It's got a full parametric EQ and they have a ton of presets for popular games, or you can just click to load custom EQs like the one Joe uses for his pads. This uses a base station with a nice big volume knob on the front, and you can access just about everything you need in hardware, including the volume limiter if you find these don't get loud enough for you. This also uses Sonar to handle game to chat mix, so you can assign your chat driver to like Discord or your music app and control the mix between that and your main audio. You can do that either on the base station itself or by clicking the volume wheel on the actual headset. This also has simultaneous Bluetooth, which means you can hear the game signal and the Bluetooth audio mixed at the same time. The base station also has 3.5mm aux in and out, meaning you can use this system wirelessly with like a Go XLR. I believe this is still the only system on the market you can do that with. There's an additional 3.5mm aux in on the headset itself, so you can still use this wired with any device that uses aux out. We've also got the infinite dual battery system here, where one battery is in the headset itself and the other one is in the base station charging, so you can just swap these out whenever you need to, and you don't need to even power down the headset to do that. The low point here is definitely the mic. It's still better than the Maxwell in my opinion. It is a really small capsule. Luckily you do have some EQ options in Sonar if you want to shape how this sounds, and I do like the idea that it's retractable, not removable, so I never have to go hunt it down. It's just really mid for the price. And do be aware that there are no secondary beamform mics here, so if you are going to take a call with these, you are going to need to have this mic out. While these are great for gaming, these are not what I reach for if I'm going to listen to music. These are passable if you're a music casual, but if you're into audio at all, chances are pretty high that these aren't going to cut it for you. These have okay channel matching. These are measurements of the left and right channel, and the closer these lines are to each other, the easier it is to pick out the direction that sounds are coming from. This factor is hugely important for FPS gaming, and obviously if these didn't work well in that regard, I would just use something else from my collection. So solid detail and solid directional cues make these a beast for FPS. You can EQ the bass up with these too, and you don't have to worry about loss of detail, so these do provide a solid single player gaming experience too. The game world feels very spacious in these. So these come out to be a very complete package for gaming, and they include active noise cancellation. The downside is that the mic is obviously pretty mid. These originally retailed for $349, but they've been in market for so long now that you can occasionally find these as low as like $260, and that is a steal for what you're getting here. There are two versions of this, and like most gaming audio products, the Xbox version fully supports the PlayStation, but the PlayStation version does not support chat on the Xbox, so choose wisely. Thanks to an update on these back in September of 23, you can use the preset EQs and one custom Sonar EQ on the console side too. If even the sale price is a little too steep on these, the Arctis 5 and 7 also exist, both without a base station. The 5 specifically uses a mobile app that allows for an insane amount of EQ presets on the console side and sounds better than what you'd expect respect for the price. If you don't really like the headset format, SteelSeries has also released some game buds recently that we'll talk about toward the end of the video. The Maxwell at $299 or $329 is what you get when you have an audio company design a gaming product. Maxwell is an audio quality first, everything else second type of experience. It's definitely not without its quirks and some pretty weird feature implementation. And when I say audio quality first, I mean this is one of the very few headsets to gain the respect of both gaming peripheral reviewers and audiophile reviewers. But to be a great gaming headset, you really have to have the right intersection of sound quality, comfort, and feature set. These came a really long way from Audeze's previous offerings, but they've been in market for just a little over 2 years now, and we've learned some things. These are planar magnetic headphones. That means they use a completely different driver technology than the dynamic drivers that we see in most headphones. It's like a very thin diaphragm sandwiched in between magnets. And it seems like you have to be more careful with these than you do dynamic driver headphones. So no slamming these down on the desk and no pushing these in towards your head when you're wearing them, or you risk damaging that driver. Like the Arctis, I'm still on my original set of Maxwells. These have seen countless hours by now, and I haven't had any issues with these at all. The first weird thing about these is the way they handle Bluetooth. It's not simultaneous, and you can't manually switch between sources. It's all automatic. If you're connected via Bluetooth to your phone, it prioritizes Bluetooth, so it stops your game audio, switches over to do whatever your phone was going to do, and then switches back to your game audio, which can be really annoying if you're just trying to game. They have rolled out numerous firmwares since this came out, but each one is an adventure in fixing something that needed fixing, but introducing new issues at the same time. Like, I don't even have the latest firmware on these because I hear it messes with the tuning, and they removed the ability to roll back firmwares a couple firmwares ago, so I don't want to risk it. The good thing is the desktop software on PC works really well for me these days, and this headset has physical controls on here to access literally anything you need to. The only reason you need to go into the software is to design a custom EQ. Using the software app on the phone over Bluetooth still feels really buggy to me even today. So again, we've got a situation where the mic is the low point on the Maxwell, possibly the lowest on the list today. This does have some background AI noise cancellation baked in, which unfortunately degrades the overall quality of the vocal, but you have to have this on running at least low, because if you don't, it cuts the levels of the actual vocal down really bad, so you're kind of locked into using this. For whatever reason, this mic is really susceptible to breath noises, both from your mouth and your nose, and it's really finicky with positioning. It's crazy to me that with all the options on the market, we have a tendency to either get a good mic or good sound, and not very often do we get both at the same time. There is side tone here, so you can hear yourself back in your own headset. It sounds really good with the boom mic. There's no lag here at all, but the big thing with the Maxwell is that if you're not running the boom mic, you have to turn side tone off. Otherwise, it's going to pull audio in from those onboard mics. It's going to make the entire audio sound terrible. So for the times that you're not running a mic, just make sure side tone is off. Outside of that, this is easily one of the heaviest gaming headsets on the market at just under 500 grams with the mic, but it's designed in such a way that it doesn't really feel heavy on the head, and I've used these for hours at a time. I also really like the stock cushions here. I know a lot of people like to upgrade these. I find these to be really high quality and really comfortable. So I guess the best way to think about the Maxwell is if you want something that will work for all of your wireless listening needs, even for those of you with a more discerning ear for audio, the Maxwell is still the king for me in that regard. You are giving up some features though. There is game to chat mix here, but there's no active noise cancellation, there's no simultaneous Bluetooth, and the mic is mid for sure. If you already have a wired solution at your desk that you primarily use for music listening, you might be better served with a more gaming focused wireless set that has all the important features for you. And these have been in market for a while, so unless that price point just doesn't faze you, if you haven't picked these up already, it might be worth waiting it out to see if there's a V2 coming soon. So we're now on Gen 5 of the Astro A50. I've owned a few of these over the years, and I've never done a proper review on them because honestly, I've just never been that impressed by these. I had a Gen 3 that had terrible connection issues with my PS4, and I just kind of stopped paying attention after that. The sound quality wasn't really that impressive to me. I thought they were really overpriced for what they were. I thought they definitely coasted on their brand name, and I felt like they appealed mainly to console gamers. So that makes these Gen 5s the most surprising entry on the list today because these are just very good. It's a really complete package, and it executes almost everything you'd want out of a gaming headset to a very high degree. The X version I have here today is $349. The standard version is $299. The big difference on the X version is the HDMI 2.1 pass-through. This does both 24-bit audio and video. So your consoles plug into the base station and then out to your TV, and there are no HDMI cables included here. That and the X version adds chat mix support on the PlayStation side. Both versions function identically on the PC, so if you don't need the HDMI pass-through, you can save yourself $50 and still get everything that's great about these. The base station has connections connections for both consoles and a PC, so you can have all three sources hooked up and then toggle between them with a dedicated button on the headset. Every other system I've seen out there tops out at 2 simultaneous connections, and this doubles as a charger for the headset when it's not in use. Like everything on the list today, you get Dolby Atmos support here. You also have G-App customization for when you're on console, you get game chat mix, and simultaneous Bluetooth. Not a big fan of glossy plastic, but the on-head controls here are really good. It's not too heavy at 366 grams. It's really comfortable for long sessions, and these rotate so you can wear this around your neck. The only features it lacks are a 3.5mm aux in. It's not on the headset and it's not on the base station, so this is 100% wireless, and there's no active noise canceling. And these earpads don't do a great job of passive noise cancellation. They are really plush and really comfortable. They've been the same design for a really long time. They just pop on and off real easy with magnets. The only thing to be aware of is that the internal opening is real small, so your ears don't go inside here. They sit more on your ears. That is something to be aware of if you're sensitive to that. So the mic on the Astro is one of these flip up to mute, flip down to go live designs. I do wish this hinge was a little more substantial, because when you have this flipped in the up position, this can flop all over the place like Johnny Sins after a tough shift, and you really have to be careful that you have this thing all the way up to make sure you're muted. That said, this is one of the best sounding, most natural mics I've heard on a wireless headset. There's a couple presets for the mic EQ that are really straightforward too, and they're presented graphically so you immediately know what they're doing. You have the default, which is the strongest performer for me. Then you have broadcast, which emphasizes the low end, and competition, which emphasizes the high end. I don't have any complaints here about the quality of this mic. I'm really impressed by this. There's 3 basic EQ settings. The default one I find to be a little too bass heavy for competitive, but that's literally just one EQ click away. You can also bring in EQs from other users or pros, and there's custom EQ in here if you want to tweak your own, and that holds true on the mobile app side too for console use. Overall, I'm really impressed with this. If active noise cancellation is not a big deal for you, it is really tight between this and the Arctis Nova Pro Wireless. Active noise cancellation is the major difference, but the mic quality is also much better than the Arctis. Doesn't have hot swap batteries, but it does have 24 hours of battery life and is always charging on the dock when you're not using it, so battery life should really never be an issue. Especially if console or home theater is a big part of your gaming equation, I think this is the way to go. Coming in at the offensive price point of $399.99 is the Razer Kraken V4 Pro, and it really begs the question, why is this a $400 headset? When we look at the standard Kraken V4 at $179.90, which sounds and feels identical, we really need to understand what justifies the Pro version costing over twice as much. The first thing is simultaneous Bluetooth, which you don't get on the standard version. I was really concerned that this was like a firmware lock, so they just put that feature behind a paywall. I did confirm with the engineers that there is a separate chip in here that allows for that that's not present on the standard version. Next is that we have a base station here. It has USB-C connections for your PC and one console, and there's a 3.5mm input here. That's an interesting choice. This lacks a 3.5mm out, so you're not going to be using this with a Go XLR or anything similar, and there is no 3.5mm aux on the headset itself, which means if you're running a wired source, you're going to be wiring to the base station, not the headset, which is kind of odd. And there's no battery charging system here like we see on the Arctis, so this is basically just a fancy breakout box for controlling features that has an OLED screen. The main feature though of the Pro is the Sensa HD haptics, which basically means you're going to get vibrations in your ear cups to highlight certain events on screen. Now if you really want to do this up, this pairs with their Freya chair cushion and distributes that haptic feedback all the way from your head down to your culo. Freya costs another $300, so that's $700 total if you want the full haptic experience. Now to be fair, when this is done well, it really is quite an experience, but that's rare. What I mean is there's currently only 10 games that really make full use of the haptics, and 5 of those have only been added in the past few weeks. There's loads of games coming soon, but those have been coming soon since I initially checked out this setup last August, and it's almost March now. For everything else, you rely on a more generic interpretation, and Razer's provided suggested settings for a pretty big list of games. Sometimes it adds real depth to the experience, like survival horror games are great. Other times, like Black Ops 6, it's just pure chaos. Something or other is vibrating nearly the entire time. It just gets exhausting. The haptic system is deep. There's tons of controls here if you want to try to tweak a title that you play a lot. If this is something that appeals to you as is, great. But this feels like a pretty big buy-in at this time based on the amount of titles that currently have full integration of Sensa HD. The mic here is small and retractable like we saw on the Arctis, but I do think this sounds better than the Arctis. You will need Synapse installed to make the most of this. You're hearing this on all default settings with the broadcast preset, which is how it ships. This also has side tone, which sounds really good, and there's no lag here either. I don't generally think too much of the mic enhancements that we see in Synapse, but the one that really stuck out to me here was the volume leveling, where you can get really loud on this thing and it preserves that level at a listenable volume, but you can also get really quiet and it still keeps that at a pretty consistent level. I should point out too that this is using the latest firmware that just came out on the 26th of February. The one that came out earlier in the month was supposed to improve the mic quality, so you're hearing this at its best right now. Razer says they're using the same mic technology in the Kraken V4 Pro that they used in the Black Shark V2 Pro 2023 edition. This is one of, if not the best sounding mics, and in all of wireless headsets. The issue is that the capsule itself on the Kraken's mic has to be smaller in order to fit that retractable design. So you're hearing the Black Shark V2 Pro also on that broadcast preset, and not only is there a huge difference in the size of the mic capsules, there's a huge difference in the sound quality that I'm sure you can hear for yourself. I think, especially at this price point, users would have wanted this quality of mic in a detachable version versus sacrificing that quality to fit that retractable design. This does feel heavy on the head at 393 grams, and you have to be careful to get it situated just right, otherwise you get some clamping force right behind the ears. This is not one of the more comfortable headsets for me. I'm good for about an hour in this thing. These pads really seal in the heat too. Normally we see this style of pad when a headphone has active noise cancellation, but at a price point of essentially $400, there is no ANC on this unit, and that's pretty rough. As for the sound, it's decent. You really need to EQ these to get the most out of them, and sadly the 3 included EQs for movies, music, and gaming are really holding this unit back, not just for music, but for gaming too. The gaming EQ especially, designed to be an FPS EQ, is really fatiguing for me. I think the sound here would be passable at $180, but it just doesn't fly at $400. So look, this is probably the best built Razer audio product I've ever seen, and the design here is gorgeous. The lighting looks insane, but I can't believe that the person who's spending $400 on a headset is really going to prioritize elaborate RGB. For me, this is wildly overpriced and still manages to miss in a couple key areas, so unless you're super into haptic feedback, there are plenty of better ways to spend your money on wireless audio. Coming in at $229, we've got the Asus ROG Delta II Wireless. The first thing that got my attention with these is how light they are at 317 grams with the mic attached. This is top 5, one of the most comfortable headsets I've ever worn. This actually gets way too large for my head, which is not something I'm used to seeing, so you might want to be careful if you've got a pretty small head. Personally, I can wear this thing infinitely. I'm talking hours and hours, no issue. So you've got 2.4 wireless, Bluetooth 5.2, and 3.5mm aux input on the headset itself. It is simultaneous Bluetooth, and the controls here are super smart. The volume for 2.4 is on the back of the left cup, and the volume for Bluetooth is on the right. It makes it really easy to mix sources, and you've got separate track controls on each side. Call controls on one side, mic mute and RGB on and off on the other. Really great layout. This can use their Armoury Crate gear for a lightweight peripheral specific install, or the full fat version of Armoury Crate if you're running other Asus stuff in your system like I am. The only reason to run it is to access the EQ presets, which are pretty deep, and there's a bass boost function here that's actually kind of nuts. Outside of Maxwell, I don't think I've heard a headset put up this much bass and not distort. That's not to say you have to use it all the time, but it's there when you want it, and these just sound really good overall. The only thing I found about the EQ and the bass boost modes is that they are tied to the PC side only, so you're not going to have those available if you're running these on console or using them just for Bluetooth. The other thing you may run into if you're using the EQ presets in Armoury Crate is that most of these have simulated surround sound enabled by default. Turn this off. It can negatively affect your perception of both distance and direction, and I found the flat gaming preset to be better than the FPS preset. The mic on the Delta II sounds really natural to me too. This was really surprising. It easily outclasses both the Maxwell and the Arctis. This does have side tone, but it only pops up in a game that supports chat or an app that supports recording. Otherwise, it's just not on at all. Unlike some of ROG's earlier offerings, this sounds really good, and it is presented completely lag-free. The only thing I wish for with this, and hopefully it's not something I overlooked, but I would like a hardware control on the headset to toggle side tone on and off, because even when you mute the mic, side tone is still active. There are some mic EQ options inside Armoury Crate, but I honestly think default sounds best. You still get good top-end clarity, and you get some warmth in the tone that really helps to capture the bass in your voice without sounding too stuffy. You're actually hearing this now on a system that doesn't have Armoury Crate installed at all. These include 2 sets of ear pads in the box, so you get the fake leather, which is going to give you a deeper bass response and slightly better passive noise isolation, but they run a little hotter, and you get a pair of breathable mesh pads that have slightly less bass and they run a little cooler. These swap pretty easy, and I really like the shape of these. At $229, you wouldn't expect these to have all the features of a flagship, and they don't. They don't have a dedicated chat driver on the PC for game chat mix, even though you can just Bluetooth to your phone for both Discord or music. And these don't have active noise cancellation. With the software being tied to the PC, you won't have any EQ options on the console side, but that said, these do work great on the PS5. On the Xbox side, you'll need to run these wired right into the controller. I got a lot of static and just overall was not a good experience. So there's a lot to like here, provided you're primarily on the PC. The mic is solid, sound is solid, it's insanely comfortable. The battery life's pretty nuts with 24 hours on 2.4 with the lighting on, or 110 hours with it off. The only thing for me is that at $229, it does feel like you're paying the Asus tax with these. Missing some of the more notable features like game to chat mix and active noise cancellation, these would be a lot more competitive at $179, $189. If the Delta II is one of the most comfortable headsets I've ever used, the Alienware Pro Wireless is the most comfortable headset I've ever used. It's only 314 grams with the mic, similar headband style, but the pad and the cups are this absolutely buttery fake leather with like a really low density foam. It's like putting little pillows on your face. The MSRP on these is $229.99, but I see these down a lot to $199.99. There's no RGB here, so battery life is 35 hours with active noise cancellation or 75 hours with it off. That's pretty nuts. The hardware controls are pretty sparse on these. There's just volume, a mic mute, an active noise cancellation toggle, and then a toggle for Bluetooth or 2.4. So strike one, there's no simultaneous Bluetooth on these. Another weird thing I noticed is that we do have both a game and a chat driver in Windows. The issue is that there's no hardware control for it anywhere on the headset, and there's no control for it in the software either. So you can assign a different app like Discord or your music app to that secondary driver, but you'd have to use a third-party software like Sonar to leverage that. So effectively, I have to call that no game to chat mix. The mic here is unfortunately very mid. This sounds a lot closer to the Arctis than it does to some of the other nicer mics we've heard today. There actually is a decent tone here. It's just the fact that this thing is so cluttered with transmission and compression artifacts, it really takes away. In the Alienware Control Center, which is probably my least favorite control software due to bugs and overall sluggish behavior, we do have the option to turn on or off their dual mic AI noise cancellation. Sadly, whether this is on or off doesn't seem to make any major improvement to the vocal quality itself. We have side tone here, which like the Delta II is active only when you're in a game or an app, but unlike the Delta II, it's very subpar here. It's not particularly clear and it doesn't get very loud. So I'm just not a big fan of this mic, and unfortunately, there's not a lot else here for me in terms of a total package proposition that would make me overlook this. The sound itself is actually really enjoyable on these right out of the box, which is good because there are no EQ presets, not even in the software. Literally no way to EQ these without using a third-party software. Most gaming headsets, particularly from SteelSeries, have so many EQ presets it's almost pointless to measure these, but I had to know what made these sound so good. Not surprisingly, it's a more exaggerated Harman curve with higher bass response. This is that classic V-shape, big lows, big highs, low mids. If you've watched my channel at all, you know that's pretty much my favorite tuning, and also very close to how Critical tunes most of his collab IEMs. The only thing you can do in the software is adjust the active noise cancellation, which I did want to talk about because it does affect the tuning on these. You get a little more bass punch and an even deeper scoop in the upper mids. These both sound good, so just pick which one sounds best to you in game. So unfortunately, there's not really a lot to dig into because the cons outweigh the pros here for me. Pros are battery life, active noise cancellation, overall sound, and these are insanely comfortable. Unfortunately, the mic is pretty mid, the feature set is lacking, physical controls are pretty poor, software support is very poor, and there's no Bluetooth mixing here. These again work great with PS5, not with Xbox. There's not even an aux to take advantage of for the controller. I know these were developed in conjunction with Team Liquid to be more of an esports focused product, but outside of ANC, the feature set here is really limited for the price. All right, so of the units that we've looked at so far today, here's the breakdown for me. Razer's a skip unless you really enjoy haptics. The Alienware feels like a skip, period. It's got great bones, good potential for a V2, but it doesn't feel fully fleshed out yet. The ROG Delta II is a touch overpriced in my opinion, but it's a really strong contender without going up to that $300 mark. I do think Maxwell still sets the bar for people with a really discerning ear that don't need active noise cancellation and aren't concerned with simultaneous Bluetooth. The mic though is still pretty mid. For those of you with a more casual ear who put a little more emphasis on the mic, I think the ROG Delta II will serve you fine for a lot less money. The Arctis versus the Astro is where things get interesting. The Astro wins in mic for sure. Battery situation, I'll call a tie. The Arctis Nova Pro is still the only setup that works completely integrated with the Go XLR setup. The Astro X has best-in-class home theater routing. The Arctis still works well with wired sources. The Astro is 100% wireless only. It's a tough call, but I think the answer is that if you need to Go XLR support and or active noise cancellation, go Arctis, otherwise go Astro. All right, honorable mentions today, starting with the Turtle Beach Stealth Pro. I liked this headset a lot because it did one thing exceptionally well, and that was directional imaging in FPS games, specifically Call of Duty. But after a while, I just found myself going back to the Arctis Nova Pro Wireless, both for comfort and for feature set, and once Joe dropped the custom pads for the Arctis Nova Pro Wireless, it was just kind of game over for the Stealth Pro. This also was the only Turtle Beach product I'd ever used that didn't have that like end cap at target like Turtle Beach feel to it. I got their Atlas Air in shortly after, and that definitely felt like a return to that lower tier build quality, and their initial firmware made stuff like the volume wheel on the side feel really janky for some reason. Luckily, they've got that smoothed out now thanks to some firmware updates. I was really excited for these because they're open back, and you just don't usually see that in a wireless gaming headset. Unfortunately, they don't really give me the same spacious feel that I get out of my higher end open back audiophile headphones, and I still got a lot of the negatives, like they leak sound like crazy, so that's definitely something to be aware of with these. Pros are they're really dialed in for FPS, the mic sounds great, they're really comfortable, and they have dual driver game and chat mix. The downsides is that there's obviously no active noise cancellation, because that really wouldn't make a lot of sense in an open back. There is no simultaneous Bluetooth mixing, and the overall build quality here just doesn't really inspire confidence. Even after the firmware updates, I would probably skip these at their full asking price of $180, but if you could find these closer to like $140, these would be a good pickup if they meet your needs. As for the Corsair Virtuoso Max, I have reviewed that thoroughly already. I will link that right up here, but at their price of $329.99, flagship money, they fell pretty short for me. And lastly today, one that was pretty surprising for me, these are the Arctis Game Buds from SteelSeries. These are essentially like a true wireless earbud that also happen to have 2.4 wireless for gaming. Regardless of what they look like, I've never been the type to wear a gaming headset out and about in public, but I actually would with these. They've got a solid amount of on-head controls, and the outsides are actually tactile buttons, not a touch sensor, so you don't get any missed inputs. You just have to go a little light so you don't jam these into your ear canals. I know these aren't the first product of their kind in market, but they are the first ones I've heard, and I was actually surprised at how good these sound. They're somewhat comparable to the Sony XM5 earbuds that I wear to the gym. The detail is there, but the bass response isn't quite there on these, and the active noise cancellation isn't quite as good. I wasn't able to try any alternate tips on these because the nozzles here are the smallest I've ever seen on any product, which is good to know if you've been burned before by IEMs that have really thick nozzles. These do sound a little warm in their stock tune, but you get the benefit of all the different EQ presets that SteelSeries has. Here you can use these either on the desktop or the mobile app, and they save to the buds themselves. I do find if you're at the desk, these work best if you have a dedicated media control on your keyboard or elsewhere on your desktop, because adjusting the volume on these can be a little tricky. And the mics are understandably poor versus a solution with an actual boom mic, but there is side tone here. So you do get active noise cancellation, there is no Bluetooth mixing, and as long as you're not super dependent on a mic, these don't feel like a bad pickup to me at $160, especially if you're able to leverage them both as a lifestyle product and a gaming product. Damn, that was a big video today. Let me know in the comments if there's a specific headset that you want me to take a look at. Otherwise, I'll probably come back in a couple months and do another one of these, but more geared towards the budget end. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay up.